he's been obedient and faithful to God, but it could have cost him a heck of a lot. Welcome to the Bible in 1 Year podcast, brought to you by two Brits and a Bible. Today is day 7, and we're going to be covering Genesis 22, 23, and 24.
In Genesis 22, God asks Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, but God then prevents it and sacrifices a ram instead. Genesis 23, Sarah dies. Abraham purchases a field of Ephron to bury Sarah. And in Genesis 24, Abraham's servant takes Rebekah for Isaac, and they are married.
Lovely. All right. So a lot in here. This is actually one of the biggest parts of the Old Testament, really. Abraham sacrificing or going to sacrifice Isaac.
Yeah. Yesterday you were asking me if I'd heard of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the answer was kind of a bit, maybe. But even before being a Christian, 100%. Even before being a Christian, 100%, I could definitely tell you about Isaac and the sacrifice of Abraham and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so. No kidding. It is such a big thing, and it's just sort of throughout everything in here. It is Abraham being obedient, right? He doesn't know how he's been promised a son. He's been promised, descendants numerous as the stars in the sky. He doesn't know how God's going to do this. He's just being obedient to what God says. And it's not our job to know the plan. This is something I know I've chatted with you about before. It's not our job to know the ins and outs and the full plan. It's just our job to be obedient. And that is what's so important to God.
Absolutely. That links to something in Genesis 22, actually, I was going to talk about. The fact that God says that all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me, Genesis 22, 17 and 18.
Yeah.
So, it is that clear. And, as we've discussed before, it's not like a linear path that you just obey and everything's cushy straight away or anything. But eventually you'll get there, and God will always fulfill whatever he promises you, which I just think is amazing.
Exactly. And just on that same bit, sorry to jump in on you there. I know in the Message version, which is what I've just picked up there, Genesis 22:12, it actually specifies in my NIV version, it's don't lay a hand on the boy, do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God. But in the Message version, it says about how fearlessly you fear God. And it's a bit of it sounds like it could be a double negative there, but it's not. And it's just how you fear God so fearlessly, so openly, so recklessly. And it's a really, really amazing thing when you think about it.
So, as a side plot, being an English teacher, I suppose I can't help but notice these things. So yesterday I was on about hyperbole. Today I have to tell you that's called polytoton. When you take you take the root of a word like fear and you play around with it. So I fearlessly fear God is definitely polytoton.
There's the word for today, ladies and gentlemen, polytoton.
Yep. Yeah, and I'll pay you 100 quid if you can spell it. Just kidding. Don't try, because then there's live evidence I have to pay. It's a pretty strange spelling, put it that way. It's got a PT in the middle of it. But I digress. So I think we need to just go a bit more on Isaac as well, because yesterday we were running out of time, just how massive it is that this is the fulfillment of these promises. There's an actual miracle now that Abraham can sort of, see and feel and experience, right? And then, the next chapter, God's like, right, time to take Isaac up to Moriah and sacrifice him. Yeah.
Massive.
Just it really, for me, being a newer Christian, I would say sometimes you do have like this real extra fire and passion about it because it's all fresh and new, right?
Yeah.
But with moments like this, it's really challenging, because it's like, you have to ask yourself, would you trust God enough that you would sacrifice your son? And I mean, this would hit home more for you because you have a son.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, but I could. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that right now. I like to think I would, but when you're in that moment and the knife is drawn and the whatever, like
Again, it's kind of like we were chatting about having your family circumcised. You better be pretty flipping sure God's telling you this in order to be willing to do it, right? And what often I don't think gets touched on here is something that we've just been going through this again. And my wife Melody, she mentioned it to me, was actually later on when Abraham's wife Sarah dies, it says that Abraham went to mourn Sarah, and she was looking into this. And actually, at the time that she died, she was living 26 miles away, which is no distance to us right now. But in the day, that was a big old distance. And so
sorry to cut you off, but 26 miles, if you have to run it in, for a marathon, it's still a pretty big distance. Can you imagine a 90-year-old trying to do that?
Exactly.
Anyway, I don't really ruin the flow.
The thing is, at this stage, it sounds like Abraham and Sarah weren't living together. They weren't together. So you kind of wonder, after Abraham was faithful in taking Isaac up to sacrifice him, did Isaac get home and Sarah's like, oh, how was your time with daddy, sweetheart? You went to worship, because that's what Abraham said. And he's like, yeah, it was fun. Daddy tied me to a rock and like tried to stab me. Like, what impact has that had on the rest of his life, basically? Because he's no longer with his living wife. He's been obedient and faithful to God, but it could have cost him a heck of a lot. And I suppose it's something we don't really touch on, is just because we are obedient and we are faithful doesn't mean life's going to be great and rosy, does it? It can be hugely challenging still, and bad stuff still happens. I nearly said something different there, but bad stuff still happens, right? And you see it here because what long-term effect on his family did being obedient to God have?
Absolutely. And we've been mentioning a few movies. I've already mentioned the movie Noah before. Obviously you've got Evan Almighty, which is the better version of Noah, but in that, it really documents well, the Russell Crowe one, it documents well like Noah's wife, and Noah's wife challenges Noah, and he's like, she's like, are you sure that this is what God wants? And then they're in the ark and there are people screaming outside. Imagine the toll that this would have on you. So yeah, well, I mean, it's like Jesus said, right? In order to sort of save your life, you have to lose it. And you're going to be hated by others potentially, and you're going to even have to maybe turn away from your own family to really take up your cross and follow me. And that's why these are the great patriarchs of the Old Testament, right? Because they will do it, and they will stick through it in a way that you and I would have to, if we're being honest, would have to question if we could do this the way that they have, right, man? So and then if that isn't already sort of testament to how great Abraham is, then we talked a bit about Genesis 23:16. Abraham agrees to 400 shekels of silver to pay for a plot of land to bury Sarah when she dies. And the fact that you'll explain about the David thing, but for me, just quickly, the fact that he wants to be recognized not as an alien or a foreigner in this land, but as an equal now. And I think that's fair. It's fair game, isn't it, really?
Absolutely. It's the 400 shekels thing was massive. Again, Melody had looked into this a little bit, which is nice. But it goes to show that Abraham has obviously accumulated some wealth, because he's paid 400 shekels for this field and cave, which means nothing to us in modern day currencies. But it gave a few examples. And for example, King David paid for the plot of land that Solomon would build the temple on, which is going to be a massive plot of land when we get into those fund lists later in the Old Testament. That plot of land cost 50 shekels. So you're talking, what is that, 8 times that value?
8 times.
For a field with a cave in it.
It's
mind-blowing. But like you said, he wanted to be seen as honorable and wealthy and, made it.
And equal. Yeah. And I mean, I suppose if you've had the life and trials, but also blessings that Abraham has, you probably don't have much of a real kind of passion for money, right? You just be like, well, I have the creator of the universe behind my back quite tangibly, so what's 400 shekels between friends? But yeah, I did not know that about the land for David. I thought that was fascinating that you shared that. So there you go.
Well, you know what, If you have any questions, you know to visit our Facebook page, 2 Brits and a Bible.
Or you can email us at 2britsbible@gmail.com.